It's good to be here with you all this morning. As Pastor said, my name is Pastor Rob, and I have the amazing privilege of serving as the Fuse College pastor. Do we have some Fuse people in the house tonight? Oh, y'all let the rowdy people up front today. Okay. But it is a dream come true that I get to be a college pastor, and I absolutely love everything that I get to do here. Y'all, God is on the move whenever it comes to Fuse. He is doing some absolutely incredible things. This past week, we had a night of worship and baptism where we had about 240 people here, 14 people getting baptized, and it was just such an incredible celebration of renewed life and people declaring their faith in Him and saying, hey, I want to go public with this. Now, if I haven't met you, I would love to meet you, but the person I'd rather you meet is actually my wife. My wife, Femi, is an incredible human, and we got to meet each other while we were both living in Stockholm, Sweden, and we got married 2 years ago. We've been together for almost 6 years now, and we actually have a photo up here, I think, of our wedding. Yes, we got married in a swamp. It's so super beautiful, alligators and all. But we were living in South Florida for a number of years, which I think we have a photo from Hurricane Dorian as well up there whenever we had to board up our house. And so, yeah, we were used to hurricane season, and we currently have 2 dogs, one that's really awesome and then one that's interesting. That's Stout. He's the really awesome, handsome one. And then we've got Copper, and he's got some good looks, and that's really where it starts and stops. So. But we love that we get to be here. We absolutely have loved being in Greenville so much. And we can't thank you guys enough for how you have welcomed us and just loved on us since moving here in January. And it was an interesting time to move, to say the least. We get here in January, and then March hits, and hello, COVID. And so it was quite the time getting to know Greenville. But honestly, we have felt so at home here and so welcome. It's been absolutely incredible. Now, as I said, that this is a dream come true, getting to be a college pastor, yet that was definitely not always the dream. If you'd have told me as a kid that one day I would be the one up preaching on a Sunday, I would have laughed in your face and run away. Because you see, I grew up in a very conservative, wooden-pewed, conservative Presbyterian church in Pennsylvania, where you had to dress up every Sunday, put on your Sunday best. And so little kid Rob did not like to have to put those slacks on and put a button-up shirt or a polo, all the itchy, gross clothes that you feel like whenever you're a kid. And so he just hated this. And so honestly, growing up, I developed this despise for church. And I really started to kind of have this angst against it. And I didn't ever want to go to church, really. And it was this thing that I knew who Jesus was, but he and I, we weren't tight. We didn't have this relationship that everyone had talked about. And there was also a lot of things going on in my life, and there was a lot of sin in my life that made me feel as if I couldn't walk in those doors. And it made me feel as if the people that were in that building actually despised me. And you see, for years and years, there was this huge gap where Rob was way over there and the church was way over there, and I said, great, I'm going to go do whatever the heck I want. So the fact that I get to be here today is kind of a crazy story. And so today, what I want to do is I want to talk about some of those things that led me to here. The things that the Lord did in my life and how He worked through even the hardest and roughest times in my life to actually push forward His kingdom. Because you see, I think God wants to do that in all of our lives. I think God wants to take the thing that we see as a burden and the thing we see as darkness and trouble and frustrated about ourselves, and He wants to actually elevate that and make it the very thing we stand on, the very platform that we can then go out and preach His gospel. And so, guys, I'm so honored to get to be here today, and I have to say a huge thank you to Pastor Jason and just allowing me the chance to get to be here because, y'all, he has done an incredible job these last couple of weeks with this series, Traveling Light, and really talking a lot about different mental health things and the fact that we do carry this baggage around with us and how we ought to let it go and leave it in front of the cross and how we all have these anxieties. And some of us, anxiety is a very real issue that we deal with every single day. And it's something that physically affects us and how a lot of us, including myself, we all deal with addictions in our lives and how yes, it is a choice for us to enter into that first, But then we get so deep in that addiction that we have no idea how to get out. And Pastor's done such an awesome job laying out this foundation for us to be able to practically work through these things. And today, before we jump into the last part of Traveling Light, I want you all to do me a favor and pull your phones out, pull your notebook, whatever it is you're taking notes with. If it's the app, go ahead and pull your little note section up on your phone. And what I want you to do is this number on the screen behind me and on my t-shirt, write it down. Write it down, take a picture of it, save this number. We'll come back to it and I'll explain it, but I promise you this number is going to be important. You see, the thing I want to talk about today is something that has had a big effect in my life, and I think it's had a big effect in a lot of your lives as well. Today we're talking about depression. And when we talk about depression, we're going to talk about it in two different ways, and I want to define it in these two different categories. One is a circumstantial depression, and this is something that we've all dealt with. The loss of a loved one, a job loss, things going in our lives the way that we never expected them to, being met with frustration and heartache. Like, we have these times where we just feel sad, we feel down, and we've all experienced circumstantial depression. The other thing is clinical depression. Now, this is the type of depression that you see, it doesn't go away. In fact, it feels like you're just living with a cloud, like it feels like everything you see is almost gray-toned. And all your emotions seem down and everything like that. And it lasts for several days at a time. You might have a good day here and there, and it's awesome. But then it starts back up again. And oftentimes it's something really small that just triggers it. And you don't even understand why, but you're down. And it lasts. You might feel better for a little bit, maybe even a couple weeks, but then it all comes crashing back down. You see, knowing if you have clinical depression is actually really important. Because if you keep looking at yourself and going, it's just this thing going on in my life. It's just this one thing. I just had a bad week. I had a bad day. Of course I'm down. Well, then how many bad days does it take to add up before you actually go seek help for it? And some of you need to hear this today that, hey, you need to go seek help for your depression, because I needed that. I needed someone to sit down with me and say, hey, bud, this isn't normal. You need to go seek help for it. And there is help for it. The number I had you write down, that's the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. If you know someone, or if you ever find yourself in a place where you're at the end of your rope and you feel as if, the world's going to be better without me, call that number. There are people trained there to help talk to you. They're just there to listen and to talk with you. If you know someone who is in that place, give them this number. Call the number for them and give them the phone. You could save someone's life through that. The thing is, if you think you have clinical depression, the biggest thing I can urge you is go talk to a doctor. Go talk to someone about it. Don't sit there alone. But today, the scripture I want us to look at is in Mark chapter 5. It's a story a lot of us know. It's the story of this woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. And Jesus is in the middle of this crowd, and she comes up and she touches him, and she is healed. But what I want us to look at is the fact that right before this, Jesus had just finished a healing. And what does he do? He gets in a boat and he goes to the other side of the lake. And as soon as he gets to the other side, there's already a crowd there. Why? Because everyone knows this is the man I need to see if I want to get healing. This is the man. This is the healer. This is the Father. This is God. And so everyone is crowding around him. And we find that a synagogue leader asks Jesus for his help. He says, hey, my daughter is sick and dying. Will you come help heal her? So what does Jesus do? What Jesus always does. He says, yes, absolutely. I would love to come help heal your daughter. And so when we pick up in Mark chapter 5, verses 24, we see a large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of feeling better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him, and he turned around into the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," the disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking. He kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Overhearing what they said, Jesus told them, "Do not be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly, and he went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him. He went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her something in a language that I can't say, which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished, and he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. You see, a lot of us, like I said, we've heard this story, but the important thing is that Jesus, he was already on his way to heal this child. When this woman who had been suffering for 12 years decides, "You know what? I need to go talk to him. I need to go see the healer for the illness that I have tried everything else to fix in me." And so Jesus is completely bogged down in this giant crowd. And it becomes so hard for him to even move that his disciples laugh at him when he asks, "Who's touched me?" He's like, "Who has not touched you here?" But you see, this lady, she fought her way through the crowd, not to even talk to him. She didn't even want to speak to him. All she wanted was to reach out and touch his cloak. How many of us have a faith enough that we don't even need to hear from Jesus? All we want to do is reach out to him and know that he will reach back and know that that is enough for healing in our lives. You see, she had been dealing with this for 12 years. This bleeding, this thing that made her unclean, made her this outcast to society. It had made her this thing that no one wanted to talk about, and she had this hidden thing in her life. Y'all, today, one of my main things is that I want us to kill the stigma behind depression. Because depression has become this thing in the Christian world for whatever reason that we love to put as the outcast. No, you can't deal with depression and be a Christian. That's what we love to believe. Y'all, that is such a lie. There is so many lies in that, it is not even funny. You can't just have enough faith, just believe harder, feel better, and will your way out of depression. You see, it is this thing that the enemy does within us, and it is this illness that we have, yet we're so afraid to go and talk about it that we hide it. Y'all, the shame and guilt are no more. The first thing today is that the shame and the guilt are no more. The problem is real. Depression is real. But the shame and guilt don't have to be. So why can't we deal with it on our own? Because we often look at it and go, "Yeah, but Rob, it's just me. It only affects me. I'm the one that deals with the depression, so I have to be the one to fight it." Y'all, no. Because we see in this story that hidden things hurt things. You see, this woman was keeping it hidden for so long. If she would have surrounded herself with people and said, "Hey, I am hurting. Can you help take me?" Do you know how many people would have fought with her to get to Jesus for her? But she kept this thing hidden, and we see that in the story. Whenever she does it and he turns around, she doesn't just automatically go, "Oh, it was me." No, she hides away for a little bit. And he keeps asking, "Who was it? Who was it that touched me?" Why? Because you see, Jesus will never just keep moving on. He will always turn around to find you. How many times we think Jesus is so busy dealing with everything else in our lives that we're like, "You know, my little sadness, It's fine. I'm just having a down day. I'm just a little sad this morning. No, go seek Jesus because he will always turn around and say, hey, come here. I want to help free you of this. But it first takes us fighting our way to him. And we'll never fight our way if we keep being bogged down with the shame and guilt. Depression is this hidden illness that none of us are really willing to talk about. Because you see, depression, it also changes the way we see things. Much like this woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, you have to think that at some point she looked at herself and went, well, this is life. This is just how I'm going to be forever. I've been dealing with this for 12 years, trying to go to all the doctors, trying to go to all the things. So I guess I'm just going to accept this now. But she never gave up. She got to this place where she said, no, there's one last chance. Those of you that are sitting in your depression and are going, this is just how I see life now. I guess this is just me. Because depression changes how we can live our lives because we just live with it for so long that we accept it as normal. And I want to challenge us today to say, no, it's not. It is not what God intended for us to do with our lives. He has something so much better and so much more free than we could ever imagine. I love in verse 34, it says, he said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Your suffering is over. How many of us today want those very words spoken over our lives? How many of us today would give anything to hear God say to us, child, your faith has healed you. Your suffering, it's no more. It's done. How do we do that? We have to start by killing the stigma, killing the shame and guilt that is surrounded by it. For those of you dealing with depression, you need to kill the shame and guilt you feel. Those of you that don't deal with it, I want to encourage you to help kill that stigma by having conversations about it. By making those around you feel like you are a safe place that they can talk to. That they are not being judged as lesser of a Christian because they deal with it. We need to kill the stigma. Why? Because we look at it and we think, I can do this. This is my thing. Depression's an inward thing. But y'all, we see that you can't fight alone. Don't fight alone. You hear out of our mouths all the time, you can't do life alone. At Fuse, they are sick of me saying it because we say it every single week. You can't do life alone. And we say it here on Sundays because it's so important. It's why we have small groups. It's why we have classes. My challenge to those of you that are dealing with depression is, who really knows you? Who really knows what's happening in your life every single day? Who knows the things that are going on in your head? Because we get so caught up in here that we never actually let other people in. It can be really hard to ask, but we have to ask for that help. It can be hard to ask those that are dealing with depression, hey, how are you doing? But I promise you, you'll never regret asking that question. You see, years ago, I told you that I used to not like the church at all. And it was back when I was in college that I was really in this place of super low depression. And I had just had a fight with a friend of mine. And we fought. And at the end of the night, I found myself sitting in my shower crying. Really pretty picture of Rob in your head now. You're welcome. But there I was, because I was down and I felt like I was out. And you see, I lived with 6 other guys at that time. And I had some of the absolute best roommates I could have ever asked for. They followed Jesus and they all loved him. And they knew I didn't, but they didn't care. They were going to love on me no matter what. You see, what they did that night, we had this bathroom where there was 2 showers, a couple of stalls, and shared sinks. And they came in and they sat outside the shower one by one. And they just said, hey, Rob, I don't know what's going on, but I love you. I'm here for you. If you want to talk, I'm here. Because they were like, yo, why is Rob in the shower for 3 hours? But they came in and they sat. And that's all I needed. All I needed was them to sit there and say, hey, I love you. And to listen, to give me the chance to speak if I wanted to. I wasn't ready in that moment. And so I didn't, but I knew that if I started to talk, gosh, they would listen. So my challenge to all of you is If you're not dealing with depression, who around you needs your ear? Who around you needs you to sit outside of wherever it is they are in life and just listen? Because you see, they didn't try to drag me out of the shower. They didn't try to drag me out of the place I was in. They just tried to sit there and love me right where I was. They met me exactly where I was in my life. And so I needed the right people that were around me. Now, 2020 has been quite an interesting year to say the least, right? And so really, we look at this year and we're like, man, this might be one of the worst years, but personally for me, 2016 was the worst year of my life. You see, 2016, at the beginning of it, I got the chance to go to Asheville, North Carolina with my parents. And we took this photo that's up on the screens here. And it's one of my absolute favorite photos. We were driving through the mountains, and I was like, all right, let's pull over. Let's just take a picture real quick. And gosh, I'm so glad I did, because I had no idea that that was going to be the last normal family photo we ever had. Because you see, on February 2nd, 2016, my mom, she went into the hospital with a stroke. While I was living in Florida, they live in Pittsburgh, and I'm their only son. And so my dad shoots me a text and says, hey, give me a call, it's serious. And that made my heart drop, because that's not my dad. And so I give him a call, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? He said, hey, mom's in the hospital, she had a stroke. And so it was about a week later, I was able to go up because of different circumstances. And so I get up there, and I walk into the hospital room, and there's a woman laying in this bed that I don't recognize. And they say, no, this is your mom. And I'm like, no, this isn't. Because you see, she looked so different, and she had been so mangled by the medicines and things going on in her body that she looked so different, I could barely recognize her. She couldn't see anything. And so I got there, and I was like, God, what are you doing? What is this? What's happening right now? And so we just entered into this time of prayer and going, Lord, I trust you. And it was a moment where I had a decision to make. I had a decision of, am I going to let this be something that defeats me? And am I going to let this be something that then rules the rest of my life? Or am I going to let God take this and make this something that I can then stand on and share his gospel through? And that's not an easy decision. And it's a decision that has to be made moment to moment. And there was a time where we got to see her being healed in amazing ways. I got in on a Monday, and I left a week later. And by the time from when I got there to when I left, she had healed so much. The Lord had done such a work in her body that she was able to go to rehab as I left. And it was just such a miracle of her going from not being able to see, not being able to talk, anything, to being able to actually go to rehab. It was insane. Now, y'all, I tend to be a mild person. I tend not to get very angry very quickly, or I don't yell, I don't raise my voice. But let me tell you, when it comes to my parents, I am rather protective, I learned. Because I loved all of our nurses that were there to be with us, except for one. Now, nurses, I have a ton of respect. Genuinely, I have so much respect for what you do, because y'all saved my parents' lives. And so y'all are so important, and I can't give it up to you enough. But you see, my mom, she had to learn how to swallow again. She had to learn how to drink and how to eat again, because the stroke wiped it out. Like, can you imagine having to learn again how to eat? It's insane. And so it was the middle of the night, and I was spending the night in the room, and I was laying in the chair, and the nurse came in to give her a little bit of water. And my mom, learning how to drink, starts to cough. And the nurse yells at her and says, how stupid can you be? Don't do that. I said, oh, heck no. I came flying up out my chair, and I said, no, you don't get to talk to her that way. You get out of this room right now. And I talked to that head nurse, and I said, no. We are not having that in this room. Why? Because we needed the right people to surround her to get her healed, to get her to the place that God intended her. We needed her surrounded by the right people. How many of us have the wrong people in our lives that are then telling us, hey, why don't you just cheer up? Why don't you just get better? Just snap out of it already. That is not helpful in the least. And you see, we see this even in this story here of verse 35, that our support system could be the very thing blocking us from the miracle we're seeking. Because you see, verse 35 is whenever the people from Jairus' house, the girl that he was going to heal, they came to him and said, the girl is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore? You see, Jairus' very support system was the thing holding him back in that moment. How many of you have a support system that is holding you back? How many of you are surrounding yourselves with the wrong people? And so what does it look like for us to surround ourselves with the right people? You see, I thought, okay, great. Mom's alive, she's in rehab, we're good. Then Jesus said, 2 months later to the day, April 2nd, my dad went in the hospital. And we thought, okay, great, he's just taking care of himself. Like, we thought he was sick. That's it. But I get another late night call from my mom saying, hey, they said that your dad's having a heart attack. He's got fluid around his liver and his heart. And I said, Mom, that's pretty serious. Do I need to come back up? She's like, I don't know, let me ask. And so she asked, and when she asked the doctors, his literal response was, yeah, have him come up and tell him to bring the pastor because he's not making it. My dad's record has a 2% chance of survival in it. And it was this thing called pneumococcal bacterium, and it's a blood infection that caused all of his organs to shut down. And when I say all, I mean his skin even shut down. And so it was this thing that they had no idea what was going on. They couldn't figure it out for a long time. And so again, when you walk into that hospital room for the second time in 2 months, and you see the man that you admired, that you looked up to, thrashing in pain because he can't do anything and he's completely unconscious, gosh, it changes things. It puts you in a place where you really question, God, is this real? God, is this really what you intended for my life? Is this really what you want from me? Or is it better if this all just goes away? But you see, we learned. We learned from that first time that we needed to surround ourselves with the right people. And we have a photo up here of my dad in the hospital. And you see, it's kind of graphic, but it's one of my favorite photos because at the time he was an elder of our church that I grew up in. And these people around him, those are the other elders of the church. They came in and they prayed over him. And they just spent time with him, anointing him and saying, God, you are not done with this man yet. And you know what? This next photo that we have up on the screens, it's both of my parents standing with those same people that prayed over him years before, and God worked a miracle in both of their lives. And in fact, he's so not done with them yet that they're here this weekend with us celebrating the fact that they just had 25 years of marriage. And so I'm so proud of my parents because God is doing some amazing things in them, and I know I'm so blessed. But you see, the big thing that I want you to get out of that is you need to surround yourself with the right people because a miracle can happen when you are surrounded by the right people. You see, verse 37 tells us that because verse 37, we see Jesus, he didn't let anyone follow him except for who? Peter, James, John, and the parents. Why? Because they were the right people for that moment. They were the people that needed to be there. And so who are you surrounding yourself with? Those that are dealing with depression, are you surrounding yourself with people that are constantly bringing you down? People that are the cause of some of that depression, cause of that frustration? Are you surrounding yourself with the right people? You see, how can we be those people for them? We listen. What it took for me for so long was just a listening ear. Listening to them being able to listen to me and me listening to their stories, and they showed up every single time. So my encouragement to those that are like, Rob, this is great, but I don't deal with it. Great. Listen better and show up more. Those are the two things we can do better. The last thing is that those dealing with depression, we have to seek help, but know that Jesus is key. We seek help, but we know that Jesus is the key to it all. Because again, in this story, we see that the weight is real, but that it doesn't mean you have to carry it alone. We see that the weight of this woman's illness, she had suffered under so many doctors, and she had spent all that she had, and yet instead of feeling better, she felt worse. Gosh, that sounds like me a lot. That I thought I was going to the right places. I thought I was going to the right things. I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought if I just believed more, if I just prayed harder, then this would go away. And the reality wasn't that. The reality was I kept seeking the wrong things. I kept going after it the wrong way. Just like this woman, she sought the doctors, but it wasn't until she sought out Jesus that she was healed. You see, you can go to all the healers in the world, but until you fix your focus on God and on Jesus, then it will never mean anything. It will never take actual hold in our lives that will lead to the life change we want. Fixing our focus on Him first is the absolute key whenever it comes to this. Stop waiting for our problem to get worse. Because you see, so often we treat things with mental health as if they are not real. But y'all, if I fell off a roof and I broke my arm, am I just gonna go, hey, would you just pray for it? It'll heal itself. Yes, God can do that, but I'm gonna be running to the emergency room as you pray for my arm because those people can fix my arm. So why don't we treat our mental health that way? Why do we not treat the things going on in our head the same way we treat our physical ailments? Because y'all, this is a physical thing. And so we need to go seek the right help. And why am I going to the ER and not running to pastor's house? Because pastor's gonna go, dude, what are you doing here? Go to the ER. Because they are trained. Because God gifted them. God is using them to heal people. Y'all, there are people that have been gifted and equipped to help bring healing to your life if you're willing to go out and seek it. But you have to know that Jesus is the key while doing that. And so going out and fixing your focus so that He can lead you to what is actually next in your life. Some of us, we feel as if it's too late. But again, we look at verse 35, and it brings us back to where it says that Jesus was still speaking and people came over, and we see that this girl was dead. Y'all, it doesn't get much further than dead. Dead is dead is dead. There wasn't any more worse that was going to happen to her. And Jesus goes, why are you freaking out? Calm down. She's just sleeping. Rise up, girl. Let's go. We've got more to do here. How many of you feel as if you're so far gone that you could never approach the throne room? How many of you feel as if you're so caught up in depression that you just can't take those 2 steps forward? Don't fight it alone. But you have to seek help, and you have to know that first, Jesus is the key of all of these things. And so fix your focus on Jesus and listen to what He's saying, but then actually go. A lot of us, and me as well, we'll hear Jesus saying, go talk to this person. I'm like, no thanks, that's awkward. I don't want to do that. That's too much effort. They're going to think I'm weird. They're going to think less of me. They're going to think I'm not a good Christian. How could I ever be a pastor and deal with depression? Very, very real thoughts. But the reality is, God says, go talk to these people. Go seek help because I am the King and I have put them there to help you. So go actually seek that help. And if you have people around you dealing with it, be the one that says, hey, let's go get help together. Lean on me to get to where we're going. Don't lean on me because I'm your answer. I'm not your answer. Lean on me so we can go to the healer. So we can go to the one that is going to bring about that healing. And know that there are things out there for you. One is the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. The other is here at Ignite Church, we offer pastoral counseling. So if you're sitting there and you've been through this series and you've been going, gosh, I need to talk to someone. I'm dealing with a lot of things. Go to our website. It's ignitechurch.com/counseling. Go seek out counseling. Go get help for it. There's no shame. There's no guilt in it because you can't fight alone and you need to seek help, but you also need to know that Jesus is the key. You see, as we've been talking through traveling light, we've been dealing with very heavy things. We've been talking about letting go of baggage and letting go of these things that hold us back constantly. And we've been talking about anxiety and how it deals with our lives and how it can have a hold over things that it shouldn't have a hold over. And how addictions are hard. How addictions have a way of being this dark tunnel that there's no light out of. And how depression can be the very thing that's holding us down because we don't know how to get out of this fog because we can't see the light up ahead. But you see, at the core of everything, at the core of traveling light, it boils down to one thing. It boils down to the fact that we must place our focus in Jesus. We have to put him at the end of the tunnel, at the end of this thing that we are racing towards. It is him. We have to fix our focus on Jesus. But again, we can't do it alone. And there's no guilt or shame in any of it. No matter how broken and messed up we are, no matter how many addictions, how much anxiety we have, how much depression we're dealing with, how much baggage we're carrying, he is saying, hey, just run to me. Focus on me, and I will lead you to those that can help hold those things for you, who can help carry these burdens. But we have to first fix our focus on Jesus. So again, if you guys are dealing with depression or dealing with some sort of mental health, please, for the love of everything, go find help. It's out there, and there's no shame and there's no guilt in it. You have to fix your focus on him and then go forward. Let's pray. Father, we say thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for the fact that we can come together on a Sunday and talk about these issues that are so very real and so very heavy in our lives. And we can know that you are the healer, that you are the one that can bring life change about, that you are the one in command of everything, but that we can't fight alone, that we need the right people around us, that we need to make sure we're not surrounding ourselves with the wrong people. And Father, I pray that we would just go from this place being encouraged to seek help, to seek your face, to fix our focus on you. Lord, as we sing this last song, that we wouldn't miss this moment of what you have been calling us to, this moment of refixing our focus on who you are. God, I pray that this would be a time where we can have this moment of coming back to you. Jesus, it is in your precious, precious name that I pray.